President Biden under scrutiny after commuting a former Pennsylvania judge who was convicted of funneling juveniles for millions of dollars in kickbacks. Her son, our next guest, was caught up in the so-called Kids for Cash scheme and joins us right now. Sandy Fonzo is with us from Pennsylvania. Sandy, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Sandy, tell us a little bit about when you saw that this judge who was convicted for essentially sending kids to jail longer so that the prison, the private facilities could make more money. When you heard that Joe Biden pardoned this guy, commuted this guy's sentence, what did you think?
Working, so I was driving and my phone started blowing up, everybody messaging me and calling me. I had no service for most of that day, so it kind of just hit me. I was filled with every kind of emotion, hurt, defeat. Now that I've had more time to process it, it's more of anger.
Yeah.
And just, this is very deeply upsetting and personal.
It is personal because your son, this guy sentenced your son to this private prison system. The Washington Post has got an item today, and they describe what was going on. They write, to maximize the payout, they often gave kids the harshest possible sentence. Young people who were first-time offenders and probably should have received a warning or community service would end up locked up. Some were younger than 13. What the judges did caused tremendous harm to thousands of young people and their families. One young man died by suicide. Many youth became depressed and dropped out of school. The one young man is your son, Eddie. Eddie, explain what happened.
Eddie was, he was a good kid. He was, a wrestler in high school. He had his whole life ahead of him. He did nothing more than any other kids at that age do. He was at an underage drinking party and he got caught and he went in front of this judge. He was placed in our local juvenile detention center and he was there for approximately 1 month. And in that time, I was speaking with all of them and, it was to teach them a lesson, to get them back on track. And so when he came back in front of the judge, I had letters from teachers, from his wrestling coaches of my son's character. He wanted nothing more to just get back home and back to his life. And that didn't happen. He was sent to this facility and God knows what happened in that facility because when my son did come out, it was 8 months at that time, I believe. He was not the same person. He was pent up with anger and bitter for all the wrong. He would not accept any kind of counseling. He didn't want to look you in the eye. I don't know, and I can't imagine, and I try to not think about what happened to him in that facility, but he never recovered from it. We were fighting this, and these judges just had control. They had all the power, and nobody could say anything. Nobody could step up. I mean, there was a judge, Ann Laputa, in our courthouse, and when she tried to step up, she was ousted. She was thrown out. Everybody was afraid. These judges just had power, and when they shut down that our community detention center against, all the recommendations of our city board members, they built their own for-profit juvenile detention center. And this Conahan was president judge. And when that happened, he appointed Chivarella as the juvenile judge. And these kids were just funneled in and to keep these beds filled. And this went on for years. And until, the money was seen, that's when the feds finally stepped in and all this, came out.
Sandy, it sounds like your son should have gotten a warning or community service, but instead wound up going through the system and wound up committing suicide. You blame the judges for your child's death.
He ruined my son's life, my life, multiple lives. There's so many kids that have lost their life, not just my son. One of the boys that was 8, Charlie, that's actually in the documentary with us and went around and spoke out about this. He has lost his life since. There's so many kids that are still struggling. I've helped kids get out that got wrapped up in the system that were in.
It's inexplicable. Sandy, what is your message to Joe Biden, who commuted your judge's sentence?
Joe Biden came here and campaigned multiple times that he was, Joe Scranton, he was one of us. He knew of our struggles and he cared about our community and our kids and our families. And that is just absolutely not true. He is not one of us. We have an expressway named after him. I have to drive down and look at it every day, the President Biden Expressway and the Biden Street. Yeah. That's what I want done. I mean, there needs to be reform of how the overseeing of how these applicants are chosen for these pardons. And what I want to see is his name removed, because that's just, another slap in the face, another injustice on top of all of the grief that everybody in this community has already endured.
Those signs are a constant reminder of a constant pain that you live with as Eddie's mother. Sandy, I know this was hard for you to tell your story, but we appreciate you coming on today to tell us a little bit more about this Kids for Cash deal.
Increasingly, juveniles are committing serious violent crimes. In a recent 10-year period, the number of murders by teens aged 14 to 17 rose an astonishing 165%. As judge, if given the opportunity to try a juvenile offender as an adult, I will. If you're a teen and convicted of murder, rape, or violent crimes against our children or the elderly, you can expect that I will impose the maximum sentence allowed by law.
Mark Ciavarella, a judge to protect all of us.
Raise your right hand. Do you, Mark A. Ciavarella, Jr., solemnly swear that you will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and of this Commonwealth, that you will support and defend.
After Columbine, I would travel to the schools and I would explain to the students that it's a zero-tolerance policy. I instructed the probation department that I would not tolerate violence in school, weapons in school. I didn't want drugs in school. I would tell them that high school shouldn't be ruined by 2% of the kids screwing it up for the other 98%. For the life of me, I don't understand how that was a bad thing.
I did fight in school. And I knew I was gonna get in some kind of trouble. You're not allowed to fight. I just wish I could go back in time and start over from then. I'm not a kid anymore. Life goes on. That's how I just keep telling myself as life goes on.
When groups like you come here for just a kind of fun tour of the courthouse and to find out what happens in Luzerne County, he's always the highlight of the tour. Not only is he our president judge, but he has traditionally handled all of the juvenile cases. All of the young people who come before the courts go before Judge Ciavarella. And he has a wonderful, important message for you this morning. I'd like to introduce President Judge of Luzerne County, the Honorable Mark Ciavarella. Judge?
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it's a pleasure to see each and every one of you and to get to deliver a message that I hope you listen to. I don't know what life has in store for you. I don't know what life has in store for me from this moment on. But I do know that there's only one person in this whole world who can control what happens to me. That's me. And there's only one person in your life who can control what happens to you. And that's you. Whatever you have done in the past, whatever sins you have committed, you can't go back and undo it. You are going to have an opportunity today to experience what happens to people in prison. If you decide it's worth it, I'll be glad to put you there.
I bought a moped. My parents bought it for me. It ended up to be stolen. They paid $250 for it. I had it for, I think, like 2 weeks. I guess someone saw me riding it and recognized it, and the cops came to my house. They read the serial numbers or something, and it came up stolen. It just so happened to be that I bought something that was stolen.
Tried to tell them this something's going on, and they told me that I was an overprotective parent. I said, well, I don't know what that means. I said, but all I want is my son home.
I was 12 years old, and I wanted to walk my younger brother to the bus stop. When I was 12, I had a mouth on me. And I got into an argument with this little girl's mom, and she was saying, you shouldn't be using that language, blah, blah, blah. I mean, she was nowhere near as nice as I'm being about it right now. And we got into a big argument, F you, F you, F you. It ended, it was nothing big, and I went to school, and I got to school, and my principal came out, and first thing he did was, we gotta pat you down, we gotta search you.
I knew there was something wrong, that they were taking this kid and locking him up time after time after time. There was never any such instance of guilt or innocence. They were going. There was nothing anyone could do.
Caller identified himself as Officer Rositsky, and he said he was calling about my daughter, Hillary. She created a MySpace page, and I'm coming down to arrest her.
Ed was drinking. I remember Ed's father telling me that he knows Ed's at this underage drinking party. He had this plan to go up with these two cops that were friends of his, and they were going to go in and get Ed out of there and get something on him that was going to get him caught, like scare him straight kind of thing. Little did I know that we have no rights, that he's in their custody now.
I was in 8th grade. I was 13. Me and this girl, we used to be friends. She was sitting there calling me a slut and a whore, and I can't stand you because we weren't friends anymore. So I threw a volleyball at her. Then when she walked past me, she did one of those hair kind of flips in my face, and then I had it was over. We ended up fighting. They took me to the office with the police officer, called my father, told him to come get his crazy daughter out of their school. She's starting trouble.
Your kid was locked up for slapping a girl. It shouldn't have never went any farther than the local magistrate if the school wasn't satisfied with suspending her for 3 days. Not out to a juvenile judge. And then to find out it was all from greed.
This lady, she pulled my dad back and she grabbed my arm and she's like, come with me.
Judge Chivarella, he didn't even want to know anything from my side of the story. I was only 14. I couldn't believe that it was happening.
I was just, scared out of my mind. I cried in front of everyone in the courtroom for like 30 minutes.
I remember him just turning around and looking at me, and I'll never forget that look.
Former Luzerne County Judge Mark Chivarella faces charges tonight.
Prosecutors say he ruined countless young lives, sending children to jails in return for cash.
2 judges in Pennsylvania pleaded guilty today to taking huge payoffs to send teenagers to privately run detention centers.
Former judges Mark Chivarella and Michael Conahan arrived at the federal courthouse.
Prosecutors accused them of sending juveniles to a privately run detention center.
The evidence against the former judges was compiled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation
in a scandal known as Kids for Cash.
A Kids for Cash scheme.
Dodgy judges are getting payback from the private sector.
$2.6 million in kickbacks
in return for sentencing kids to juvenile detention. Folks, that's not a bribe. I call that a justice bonus.
Young offenders, often with no prior record, were brought before these judges for charges as minor as writing prank notes.
I don't deserve this. I mean, I'm not a criminal.
These people are wolves in sheep's clothing because the kids trust these people. People in this county trusted this guy.
Times Leader, Terry Morgan. Okay, so you're gonna have a press conference, and you're just getting people over there now. Judge Conahan and Judge Chivarella had entered plea agreements with the federal government in which they were going to plead guilty to honest services fraud in a tax case. For Chivarella, the key thing was that he had an obligation to tell the juveniles who were appearing before him that he had accepted money from this owner of this private juvenile detention center, and that he did not do that, so he deprived the public of his honest services. We'd interviewed Judge Chivarella a number of times back in 2004 when we first started looking into what was happening in juvenile court. We had actually gone to one of the schools while he was giving a presentation there because that was one of his big things. He went to every school every year and told them, if you commit an offense in school, I'm going to put you away. And that was his justification, so that when they appeared before him, it didn't matter what the charge was, he'd ask them, were you there when I gave this speech? Yes. Did you hear what I said? Yes. What did I say? You said you put me away. So what do you think is going to happen now? You're going to put me away. You're right. Take him out of here.
I'm very shy, but once someone does get to know me, they find out that I don't shut up and I'm really loud. And I'm extremely cynical and snarky and sarcastic and just I made it my goal to be the funny guy. My girlfriends and I, we started talking about how funny it would be if we made like a fake MySpace page about my vice principal, and then it was decided that it had to be made and it was going to be hilarious.
The police officer said he was charging her with abuse of the internet, terrorism, stalking, one of which was a federal crime. And I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm kind of freaking out. I told the officer that he was not speaking to my daughter without an attorney, and that's when he started yelling, telling me that parents like me try and get our children off, and that's why they're bad kids. And as soon as I said no lawyer, he backed off. He said, if you're gonna be cooperative, you'll get instructions in the mail. And I was like, he's telling us to be cooperative and everything will be fine. When I came off the elevators, there were tables, and the woman slid a form, but it was blank. And she said, do you have an attorney? And I said, no, and she said, sign here. Okay, so I signed here. We were briskly brought into the courtroom. The judge leaned across the table and yelled, what makes you think you can do this kind of crap? And I had my hand on Hillary's shoulder so I could feel her backing up. And I just whispered in her ear, it's okay, it's okay.
Things went very quick in the courtroom, about 60 seconds. And while I was being handcuffed, I could hear my mother wailing right next to me. And the woman who was cuffing me goes, look what you did to your mother. And I was just like, I was completely confused.
What flashed in my head is they just took my daughter away from me. She now legal and physical custody is no longer mine. And they're gonna take her away. That's what that means. I don't know what to do. I was kind of numb. And then I started calling. The local public defenders, the state, the governor's action line, they told me to call the ACLU, and they sent me to a woman at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And she said, look, you're in Pennsylvania, I can't help you, but I know these wonderful people called Juvenile Law Center in Philadelphia.
We received this phone call from Lorene Transu, Hillary Transu's mother, who told us a story that was eerily familiar. We first encountered Judge Ciavarella in 1999, and we had a call from a parent who contacted us about her then 12-year-old son, who had been adjudicated delinquent by Judge Ciavarella. We were particularly interested in the fact that he had appeared without counsel and in violation of his constitutional rights. So we appealed the adjudication, and the Superior Court reversed this young man's delinquency adjudication. We had this impression that Ciavarella had been taught a lesson when we heard from Hillary Transu's mother, because it was Ciavarella, because it was really just an identical situation. We wanted to understand whether or not this was a much broader problem.
And Hillary suggested that it was. She said, I wasn't the only one in placement who was tried and sent away without a lawyer. There are other kids.
We began to look at state data. Luzerne County had a rate of waiver of counsel 10 times as high as the rest of the state. So you had a really high number of kids appearing without counsel who were placed. These were all really, really very red flags. The question for us at that point was, what was really going on in Ciavarella's courtroom?
We started to investigate further. We stood outside juvenile court. We started to get stories from kids about what had happened. Many of them were incarcerated for very minor offenses. Something's wrong here. I wanted to go stand on top of the Times Leader building and scream, someone, look at what's going on here. Someone, please look at this.
Once we put together the picture that was emerging from Ciavarella's courtroom, we realized that the so-called promise of Ciavarella back in 2001 to respect the constitutional rights of kids to have counsel was an empty promise. We had to make a decision about what legal remedies we had available to us. We filed a King's Bench petition with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to fix it. And for us, fixing it really was about undoing all of these convictions of these kids and expunging and erasing their records.
We were not aware of the issue of the not having counsel. We didn't find out about that until 2008 when the Juvenile Law Center filed its petition. We were inundated with calls from parents saying, that happened to me too. They told me I didn't need an attorney. I went in there 3 minutes and my kid was hauled away in shackles. This story after story after story. I swear it was a broken record. Everyone independently told the same story.
Immediately in the wake of our filing this application with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, we received a call from someone identifying themselves as working for the FBI, which is not a call that we get every day here at Juvenile Law Center.
But after speaking with Marcia and staff here and getting a sense of how the juvenile justice system operates and what we thought was going on, they got a search warrant and seized records.
What they were interested in knowing from us was really, tell us what you think was going on in Ciavarella's courtroom. How did you come to determine this? Tell us about the violations of right to counsel.
She was a good kid, I guess I would have to say. She wasn't able to get away with very much of anything. She had an older brother and 2 older sisters, so they kind of watched out for her. But she was happy
Yes.
You know, she wasn't a sad kid. She was never depressed. You know, she was a singer. She was in chorus. When she was a little girl, Amanda and her sister missed, I would say, like 1 day of school.
My mom and dad separated, but we still, spent time with each other. I was a straight A student, then I started into the B's because I was getting older. I started getting into the B's, not paying so much attention. I had like a crowd of friends that, my parents wouldn't really want me around, but then I had another crowd of friends that were like really positive with me. I was trying my best in school to stay out of trouble, you know what I mean? But it wouldn't work out all the time. That's when everything started.
Raising the 4 boys, it wasn't easy, but we did a lot of together stuff. I mean, we struggled, don't get me wrong. It was a single parent home, single income.
I remember we used to have like a family game night. We would just sit around and play board games all night, which I thought was pretty cool because, you see people doing it on commercials, so that, puts in your mind, this is what it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? If you're not doing this, you're wrong.
At that time, Justin was acting out. I was newly divorced. He wasn't a bad kid. He was just getting cocky. Justin was always a busy child. He was always extremely intelligent. He had a genius IQ by the time he was 7.
I started like building like little websites, and I got into computers, but that was before I was, getting locked up and stuff.
I would believe it was a normal childhood. I mean, I did everything that every kid would do. I pretty much grew up camping, just state forest and stuff around here. My favorite thing was actually just being with my family. It was time spent with them.
Once Charlie went to school, he wanted to go to school, and the first day of school, he went to school and he came back and he said, I'm not going. He had a very tough time from then. There's a little piece of skin that grows in your mouth on the bottom. It had grown to his teeth, which made not only his vowels bad, it made every sound of the alphabet bad. Once he got out of elementary school, they put him in Plains Alternative Learning School, and that is where really the trouble began. He'd come home and he'd say, I shouldn't be there. I don't know where I should be, but this isn't the school for me. He'd say, Mom, these kids are bad.
When I turned 14, it just went downhill.
The first day I walked into the courthouse, I already went in with a feeling that something big, unexpected is going to happen. I'm already scared right from as soon as I got out of bed that morning. Like, something's going to happen to go see a guy with a lot of power. This may not be good for me.
We got to the court building, and it's loaded. There's tons of people there. I didn't think anything of it. Like, I thought I was coming back home and everything.
The dome inside the old courthouse is just so big. It's like it was designed to make you feel small. It was designed to scare me. You know what I mean? And it worked.
We were literally in there a minute and a half at the most. The judge had already had everything in front of him.
All he did was look through some papers, and he told me that I was a troubled kid, and I don't think I was.
It wasn't just the scooter. Judge Chivarello actually took into account that Charlie was having problems in school. How did he put it now? What this appears to be is parents that have lost control of a child. And he said, I think it's time for me to get this child back in control. And he said, Camp Adams, 90 days. And they shackled my son and took him away. And that was, they should not do that. They should not do that all in front of a parent. That was the most horrible thing. I will never, ever forget that part of it.
They made me kneel with my knees on a chair, and they picked up my jeans and they shackled my legs. Then there was this little belt, and it was a belt, they tightened it in the back, and they kept me in the shackles till we got to the detention place. That was crazy. I felt like I was a grown adult going to a big jail. Like, if I'm thinking of a 13-year-old my brain now, you know what I mean? And I'm going in these gray sweatpants and these shackles and handcuffs, and that makes me feel like I'm a really, really bad kid. So while I'm having it on my hands, I was like, I was confused.
They put us in this big van. They drove us up to LCJC. Most of the time what you see first is fences. 20-foot tall fences with rows of razor wire, like I'm a convicted criminal, like I'm a murderer. And that's what it feels like. You feel like I'm now one of those people you see in the movies.
Slider, please.
I woke up in a nice bed with my family, and I went to sleep with cockroaches and criminals. Every time you went into a room, you had to do a roach look, like to make sure there's no roaches anywhere. It's dirty and there's stains in the walls and it's echoey like in the movie prisons, like throughout the cell blocks.
I was scared every day. I was scared every day because of the fact that I wasn't home. I hate the fact that I can't go to school. Like, that's your childhood life, growing up and going to school. You never realize how much you miss your parents until you're away from them. I feel like my heart was ripped out. So I was just depressed. You can't do nothing. You can't talk to nobody to come home early. Like, you could have been jail. You can't bail nobody out. They treated you like you were a piece of shit. They used to just talk to you how they want to.
All the kids are looking at you like, who's this guy? Is he someone I'm gonna have to worry about, or is he someone that I can take his stuff? I talked to staff more than the actual residents. And I felt safe in that because a staff member isn't going to beat you up, at least not in this facility.
He did a lot of physical training, like running and jumping jacks and stuff. You stayed in your cell almost all day. The only time you leave is to go eat 3 times a day. The first 2 weeks, I didn't even have a pillow. Like, you had to earn a pillow. All you are is in this little tiny room. Do your schoolwork from in there and everything.
Near the end of my stay, a kid said, I had a home pass, and he goes, I snuck in some weed. And I was 12, I never tried it. I was very interested just because, 3 months of living around criminals, you're like, yeah, I want to do it, man. I want to try it too, That was the first time I'd ever done it. And I was like, wow, it was fun. Not even getting high part, it was just, the unity.
I'd write a lot of letters. Well, they're not letters, they're more like, I don't know, poemish things. Life presents us with challenges that we must overcome, and sometimes all the detours can leave the senses numb. Life is filled with stumbling blocks we pass along the way, but it can become a stepping stone when love comes into play. Wherever there's an obstacle that we must rise above, it helps to overcome it with an attitude of love. For anger never solves a thing, and stress will bring us down, but love unlocks the doorway where hope and faith are found. Life presents us with challenges that we must rise above, and blessed is he who can maintain an attitude of love.
I tried writing the judge a letter. I was just telling him, I learned my lesson, I never fought before, I apologize, can you give me another chance? I just want to let me out on house arrest. I said, will you let me out on probation? I miss my family, this is weird to me. And I said all that stuff to him. I didn't get nothing back. I just gave up and I did my time. And the next thing you know, 4 years of my life keeps going on and keeps going on and keeps going on.
Kids were being sold for cash by former Luzerne County President Judge and Juvenile Judge Mark Chivarella. And we're talking about what happened to them at the hands of this abusive judge. I'm Corbett. You're listening to WILK AM, 103.1 FM.
Hello, Judge. Jim Avila from ABC News 2020. A lot of people are wondering how a man of such distinction like yourself could have gotten in so much trouble and sold these kids down the river.
Well, let's stop right there. Didn't sell any kids down the river.
I showed him in black and white what the U.S. attorney had charged, that he sentenced kids for cash.
It's not what you think it means. Go talk to the juvenile people in Luzerne County and you will understand what that means.
This doesn't mean that you got improper money for placing juvenile offenders into PA childcare.
Yes, that's what it says. We came to a plea agreement. I'm not pleading guilty to anything relative to cash for kids, embezzlement, extortion, quid pro quo. Absolutely not.
The judges initially entered a plea agreement with prosecutors in January of 2009, and the plea agreement they signed specified a specific sentence of 87 months. Over the course of that time period, though, Chivarella had spoken out publicly that he still maintained that he did not do anything wrong. I specifically remember one time, and he was talking to one of the television stations. He just adamantly maintained that, he never jailed a kid for cash. It was always because he felt it was in the best interest of the juvenile. And he said that. And I was watching him, and I looked to my husband, and I said, you know what? That judge is going to reject that plea agreement because of what he's saying.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Candace Kelly.
And I'm Drew Spire. Chivarella and Conahan were previously accused of orchestrating what's been called one of the worst judicial scandals ever. But their plea deals bottomed out. Now the U.S. Attorney's Office has filed a whole new case.
In February, Conahan and Chivarella pleaded guilty to honest services fraud and were set to go to prison for 7 years. In July, a federal judge knocked that plea deal right off the table. Conahan was called an obstructionist, and the federal judge claimed Chivarella denied his role in making cash off of imprisoning kids. They're now charged with money laundering, bribery, extortion, fraud, racketeering, and federal tax violations.
My customers are just disgusted with everything, you know what I mean? Here's a guy that, you know what I mean, one of the best positions you can be in, a judge, a job of honor, and making terrific amount of money, not counting all the gratuities, you know what I mean? And he has to go and do this on top of everything else. That's just total greed.
He was a public servant. He was trusted by the people to do a job. He took advantage of us all, and it's very disheartening and it's pretty disgusting. He took advantage of, children that may have made a mistake somewhere along the line.
He took it to the extreme, like that fight in the schoolyard. We all got in fights in the schoolyard, you know what I mean? It was simple things that shouldn't have been sent to a detention center.
I've known Mark Chivarella for a long time. He was a very decent person, and I was shocked when I found out what was going on. So I just think he was, I won't say victim, but he just fell into a bad situation.
Since the plea agreement was rejected, he's not speaking to the media. He's learned to finally keep quiet.
Are you ready to go to prison, Mark?
I have not told my attorney that I agreed to do this documentary. And maybe me doing what I'm doing is going to come back to hurt me. But I felt this was an opportunity for me to let people know what really happened. I'm not this mad judge who was just throwing kids away and shipping them out and locking them up and putting them in shackles. No one would ever look at the whole picture. They only wanted to look at a little bit of the picture. All the media ever focused on was cash for kids. If that was something that the feds wanted to charge us with, then bring the charges and we'll go to trial.
When Mark ran for judge, I didn't know Mark that well. He came on the bench in '96. That's when we started working together and developing a relationship and friendship. And we became very, very close friends, and still are today. Mark was a tough juvenile judge, but from all of the feedback I got when I was president judge, from law enforcement, the parents, the superintendents at the schools and principals, told me he was working. He was doing a great job. I had never had a lawyer or anyone ever come to me and say that Mark was doing a bad job as juvenile judge or didn't have the interests of the kids at heart.
Judge Chiavarella said, did not plead guilty to kids for cash, I did not jail kids for money, but in reality, he never pled guilty to kids for cash. That's when the whole kids for cash angle was born. People saw that you had a juvenile judge who was sending kids to a center, he got money from that center, they put 1 + 1 together and it equaled 2. And that really is an oversimplification of what happened.
Mark started to talk about the deplorable conditions over the juvenile facility. Actually went to the commissioners and said, we need you to build a new detention center.
The commissioners said that they would build a facility, but they wanted to wait till after the election. After the election came and went, there was no facility being built. From that point forward, my goal was to get a facility that was going to be safe and clean in an environment where I would feel comfortable if my kids had to go.
Judge Chiavarella came in to see me one day and he said, these guys aren't going to build this thing. It's never going to get done. You're good at putting investors together and doing things. He said, why don't you try to put a group of investors together to build a juvenile detention center to lease it to the courts or the county? I said, okay, fine, I will.
Judge Conahan was uniquely qualified to bring this deal together. He had a degree in finance, and he was also a very wealthy and astute businessman. He had multiple business dealings in addition to being a judge. So Conahan decided he was then going to seek out investors, including Robert Powell, who was a very good friend of his, to see if they could get money together to build a private for-profit center that they then could lease to the county. Powell did that. Next, it goes back to Chiavarella. He was very good friends with Robert Miracle. He'd known him since Miracle basically was a kid. Miracle owned a construction company that specialized in doing commercial developments. He suggested that Miracle put a bid in on the project, which Miracle did. He was a low bidder. He won the contract, and then he built the center, which was owned by Powell and others. At some point, Robert Miracle walked into Chiavarella's chambers and told him that he was going to pay him a finder's fee as a reward for referring him. Chiavarella, on his own, decided that he was going to split it evenly with Judge Conahan. His reasoning was that Judge Conahan was the person who had put the deal all together, so he felt that he was deserving of half the money.
Rob Miracle was awarded the contract, and after the contracts were in place, he said to me, and I'll never forget it, this is your lucky day. And that's when he told me he was going to pay me a finder's fee. And that's when I asked him, is this legal? Is this something you can do? And he said, I do it all the time. Anybody that brings me a project, I pay them a finder's fee, and I'm going to pay you one. 10% of his construction cost, $2.2 million.
I'm real good at this. I'm a news guy. I do this for a living.
Now, from the Entercom radio studios in Northeast PA, here's Corbett.
We're talking about justice. We're talking about lawyers. We're talking about kids for cash. Let's go to Michelle. Michelle calling from Harvey's Lake. What's your take on this today, Michelle?
This thing that it was a finder's fee, I absolutely do not believe that any of the people involved believe that.
When you pay a judge cash money for anything other than the job the judge is paid by the taxpayers to do, they call that a bribe. They call that a kickback.
They accepted approximately $2 million from Robert Miracle. They claim it was a finder's fee. Finder's fee is not illegal. It happens a lot in real estate. What happened with Chiavarella, the reason it was illegal is he got the money and then he made judicial decisions without advising the people who were appearing before him that he took that money. And he also had not reported the income that he received on his taxes for that year. That is the only thing that he is admitting to. Anything else regarding the kids for cash, he does not acknowledge.
The first monies that we received were paid into beverage marketing. It was a company that Mike Conahan owned. He said to me, look, I'm going to pay the taxes on this money. Unfortunately for me, he never paid the taxes. But what I ethically did wrong was I did not put Rob Miracle's name down on my ethics statement that I filed with the Supreme Court that I received income from an outside source. And that was wrong. I had two choices. I could take the money and report it. And if I wasn't going to report it, don't take it. Well, I chose to take the money and not report it. But did I think it was a crime? No. Did I know I was committing an ethical violation? Absolutely. And the dark side is I wasn't strong enough ethically to not do that. I was concerned how people would perceive the juvenile court judge getting a finder's fee from the person who built the facility. It wouldn't be perceived too well. Well, unfortunately, that wasn't a good story. Cash for Kids was a better story.
Fill me with flaming desire.
Normally, I'd make some kind of a crack about this being the kind of music that they play at the going-away parties for gangster lawyers, but since we have Cliff Haynes on the line, who's the president of the Pennsylvania Bar Association, I'll cut you a break, Cliff. I won't say that.
I think they pled guilty conditionally to theft of honest services.
Correct.
What does that mean? They didn't plead guilty to sending children to a juvenile institution in return for cash.
See, the federal government will argue with you that they did, in fact, do just that. Cliff Haynes is the president of the Pennsylvania Bar Association. Come back, we'll talk more with him. You better listen. The government said from day one that it was a quid pro quo. Now Chivarella was saying, no, that's not true. And we started to see that this might not come together as smoothly, this plea agreement, as had originally been hoped for. All I know is the deal is off, and we're supposed to get ready for trial. The feds say he sold kids for cash. That's what the feds say they will prove if this case goes to trial.
Juvenile Law Center.
I think what Chivarella did was akin to putting on a robe and setting up a courtroom in his garage. When I received the call from Lorene Transu, and she told me what had happened to her daughter, who at that point was a sophomore in high school, our first concern was to get Hillary out of placement and to undo the adjudication of delinquency.
The day of my new court hearing, we walked up to Judge Chivarella and said that the original trial that we held was without an attorney and that I did not know that I had waived my right to attorney and that we had to have another trial. Chivarella said, all right, fine, you've got a week then. The night before I had the second court hearing, the Juvenile Law Center was trying to work out something called a consent decree. The consent decree works similar to probation, except the terms are sort of negotiated, and at the end of the consent decree, my record would be expunged. Unfortunately, the victim had to agree to the consent decree also. That day at court, we went in and Chivarella was like, wow, the victim agreed to this? I guess I'll accept, but you know what I think should be done with you so that you'll learn your lesson. He seemed pretty bent on sending me back.
The failure around the country for too many years, and for actually decades, is that facilities have used a quarantine model. We'll just keep a kid out of their own home communities for a period of time with different people, and they will be cured somehow of their behavior, or at least won't be misbehaving at home. And when they return, they'll be better. Well, it doesn't happen that automatically. Placement of a child outside the home is an unnatural act when it's done involuntarily. It can be very traumatic, and it disrupts normal adolescent development.
They never let you out without probation. I got into a lot of trouble in school. I would talk back to my teachers. I was not a big fan of homework. And they, instead of saying go to the principal, to me it was go to your probation officer because he was right downstairs. I mean, it was things like I jumped over a table in the lunchroom one time, and since my PO was in the school, that was a violation. As soon as I got down there, he pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Like, if you do this again, you're going to wait till you're 21. That's scary. When someone's in and they say, if you mess up again, you're going to get 8 years, and I'm not past puberty yet.
One of the disturbing features about the juvenile justice system is that once kids get into the system, it's incredibly difficult for them to get out. There's a mechanism that takes over that keeps kids in that system. If they get out of a facility, they're on probation. There are vast numbers of kids across the country who are picked up while on probation and reincarcerated for technical probation violations. It is often a story that can go on not simply for months, but can go on for years.
I had to see that Chivarella's face so many times I could sketch it from memory. Chivarella's like 3.5 foot on a good day, but he has this stand and this chair that are just enormous. So I'm seriously like this, my neck hurt trying to see this guy. He sentenced me to Northwestern Academy, which is like shave my head military, like screaming in my face. I'm 14 years old, 13, like, dude, what do you want? I jumped over a table. You don't get a 12-year-old, put him in a placement with all these like criminals and expect him to come out saying, I'm going to be an outstanding citizen. He comes out knowing how to make explosives, knowing how to rob a place and not get caught. Like, these kids would tell me things that I really did not need to know at 12, 13, 14. I just wanted to escape so bad. I started drawing. The first run is in a cage because I was locked up. You just feel like you're in a cage all day. The second run was a footstep, the actual act of me getting out of there. So I kind of saw it as like a threefold process. And the last run is like the stripes of the flag in it. Like standing tall, I'm free now. You're stuck, you're out, you stay out. When I did get released, that actually probably was the happiest day of my life.
When you're jumping. Oh my God.
My son, Eddie, he was always just a fireball. 2 years old, he rode a bicycle without training wheels. Ed's father, we weren't together for real long, but he was always part of his life. Ed was, I would say, 8 or 9 years old when the school started saying that he had attention deficit disorder. He was put on Ritalin. I didn't like what it was doing to him, and we didn't last long on it. I just thought that I'd rather him be him, and whatever we have to work on and deal with, we would just work on, and he would learn that way. Ed was always a great kid, a respectful kid. But once he got older, 14, 15 years old, he did drink.
What are you doing?
I heard through his grandmother telling me that Ed's father was drinking, and she said Ed was drinking too. I never thought that was appropriate. He needs you as a father, not as his friend. I became, I think, the mother and the father the summer before his senior year. I would catch him sneaking out to go out with his friends, and his dad saw him the one time coming home, and he had way too much to drink. His dad had this plan to go up with these 2 cops that were friends of his, and they took the pipe that was at this party and put it in his truck so that it would be, in his possession. All we ever wanted was the best for Ed. Nobody's going to do anything that, you think is going to hurt your kid. I just remember standing in front of the judge, and all I remember him saying is, I'm sending you to the juvenile detention center for you to sit and think about what you've done. He went in there as a 17-year-old, free-spirited kid, and then he came out of there like a hardened man, I would say. It wasn't long after he was out of there that he ended up getting into a fight because he was still on probation. He would have to go back in front of Judge Civarella. Everybody was saying that if you go back in front of him, he's going to lock you up till you're 21. He wasn't even 18 yet. So it's when he ran away. Went to Florida. He's probably gone for a month. And then he came home. 2 whole years went by. He was working in construction. He seemed to be happy again, just getting back to normal. But there was still that warrant from Judge Civarella. Ed did get a little fender bender, and Judge Civarella sentenced him now to a juvenile detention center. And he's in this facility with 13 and 14-year-old kids. Ed came out, and all I saw of him is that, he was just pent up with anger. He was. Ed got into a fight again, and he was charged with aggravated assault, so he went to state prison.
Kids are not just small adults, and the notion that kids who commit crimes should be punished in the same way as adults really ignores some very fundamental things that we now know about kids. The part of their brain that really governs their decision-making capacities and their exercise of judgment is the less to develop, and so it continues to develop well into the early 20s. Their decision-making capacities are less mature. Their appreciation of risk is significantly less developed than that of an adult. Their understanding of the consequences of their behavior is significantly less developed than that of an adult.
Two judges stand criminally charged. Whether they are guilty or innocent is not for this commission to decide. Our focus is on developing recommendations to improve Pennsylvania's juvenile justice system. Our concern is also the inaction of others, those who knew but failed to speak, those who saw but failed to act.
Here I was saying, I'm the adult, trust me, because when we get to court, we can trust that police officer, we can trust that judge to do the right thing, to be fair, to use their authority appropriately. And that's not what happened.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Have a seat, please.
When did you become a district attorney, sir?
2004.
2004?
Yes.
Who was the judge presiding at that time?
That would be Chivarella.
According to the statistics that we've been provided, approximately 54% of the cases during this period were actually cases where counsel was not appointed or counsel did not appear on behalf of the youth who appeared in the courtroom.
I mean,
half the cases were without counsel.
I mean, in as much as I was there, I would say that as much as you saw lawyers, you didn't see lawyers.
I'm the primary civil rights lawyer in northeastern Pennsylvania. Judge Chivarella orchestrated a waiver system so that people were encouraged to waive the right to a lawyer out of court without adequate explanations. It is unbelievable that that number of people didn't have lawyers. We're talking about children. So a child can't sign a contract. So now you have parents signing away rights because the parents are scared, because the parents are being assured you don't really need a lawyer.
I said to my friend, I said, man, did you have like a lawyer? And she was like, no, nobody has lawyers. And I was like, but haven't you seen Law and Order? Like, everybody has lawyers. Like, you're supposed to have a lawyer. Like, that's what, if you don't have a lawyer, you get one assigned to you. Like, isn't that that? And she was like, I guess it doesn't work that way for kids.
I never denied a kid a right to an attorney. I shouldn't say that. Once I did. But from that point on, if you came into my courtroom and you wanted a lawyer, you got a continuance. That's why we had that written waiver. Because you can waive that right. You would read it, you would sign it. You come into court, I'd ask you if you signed it. Yes. Did you understand it? Yes. Okay, thank you. And we proceed with the hearing. It wasn't to trick somebody into pleading guilty. You weren't guilty, you weren't guilty. Your constitutional rights are not absolute. You can waive any one of those rights. The question becomes, when you waive it, did you make a knowing and voluntary waiver?
I became an assistant public defender in 1976, and in 1980 became the chief public defender, and have been the chief public defender since 1980, and that's been some 30 years I've been head of that office. I knew that there are a lot of kids in there without representation. However, the only assumption we could make was that there were proper waivers in effect, that they waived their right to an attorney. Or all they have to say to the judge is, we want a lawyer, and I had a lawyer standing there. So it was very easy to get a lawyer. I could also add, the way Chivarella ran the courtroom, there was no difference in the disposition of cases that kids were represented or unrepresented. He sent everybody away. It was a school crime, you could have had F. Lee Bailey there, and they would have gone away.
How did you come to work for the Juvenile Probation Office?
I applied for the job when it was opened.
In which position was that?
The Chief of Juvenile Probation / Detention Home Administrator.
What was your role in the disposition hearing?
We handed the judge our recommendations.
Was there anything put into policy, written policy?
We had zero tolerance policies that the judge had formulated.
We just all became so paranoid and so afraid that if we didn't address school violence and school issues in a stern way, something really bad could happen.
The zero tolerance programs in the United States arose out of shootings, killings, like Columbine in 1999. We think we should have zero tolerance for misbehavior in the sense that when kids misbehave, they should be told that and taught how to behave. Zero tolerance also rested on the notion that kids are just like adults in the way that they would be deterred from misbehaving. And if they knew that they would be suspended, expelled, or arrested for a wide range of typical adolescent misbehavior, that they wouldn't behave like teens, which is, of course, farcical. So what we have in this country is a zero tolerance policy based on deterrence theory that has no application to adolescence, that suspends, expels, and arrests tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of kids a year.
Certainly after Columbine, everybody had to take a step back and say, how do we protect our kids? And unfortunately, there's that word liability, is always out there. I've been with the Wilkes-Barre Area School District for 41 years in many different capacities, and finally a superintendent. I've been superintendent for approximately 15 years. Certainly we're here to educate children, but our most important responsibility is to provide a safe and secure environment. No one wants to send their child to an environment that they believe is not safe. What we have done over the past several years is we've hired a director of safety and security, and we have 3 full-time uniformed police officers that are within our school districts. We've introduced zero tolerance policies, especially when it deals with safety, security, and things like that.
Zero tolerance has done an enormous amount of harm in the United States.
We often refer to it as zero logic, zero sense, and I think like Scared Straight programs, Chivarella used it as a program that he thought would operate as some deterrence.
Columbine really did play an additional role in what happened. the schools just really started to crack down, and cases that normally would have been handled informally now went to juvenile court. And if you went to juvenile court before Mark Chiavarella and you committed a crime in school, you were going to juvenile detention. And also, everyone, again, assumes that he jailed kids for cash. But he always jailed kids. If you look at his placement rates dating back from 1996 when he took the court, he had extremely high placement rate in the 20% range. It wasn't just after building a private juvenile detention center. And certainly that taints the idea of why he was jailing the juveniles, but he was always jailing them.
There were letters of praise for Judge Chiavarella for his philosophy. There were editorials in the newspaper, what a great judge he was, cleaning up the schools, cleaning up the streets.
I wanted these kids to think that I was the biggest SOB that ever lived. I wanted them to be scared out of their minds when they had to deal with me, because I was hoping, because of that they would never put themselves in a position again where they had to come back and deal with me. Family has an awful lot to do with why and how a kid gets in the system. People don't know how to be parents. To me, the juvenile system was trying to teach children to be responsible. When I was growing up, didn't need the system to take care of my problems. My mother and father took care of my problems. I wanted to revert back to how my mom and dad raised us. They raised us with a lot of love, a lot of caring, but a lot of discipline. My father was very hot-tempered, easy to fly off the handle. I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, and we drank a couple quarts of beer one night. One friend said, "Why don't we take that car and go for a joyride?" As we were about to get in the car, I heard this voice say, "What are you doing?" I see my cousin and my friend take off. The police officer says to me, "You better come with me." The next thing I know, the juvenile detective, John Ganis, said he'd give me a ride home. And as we're driving to East End, I am getting sicker and sicker and sicker. We walk in the house, my mother calls my father, and he said to me, "What's the problem here?" I looked at my father and I said, "We were gonna steal," and I didn't get the word out of my mouth. And he just looks at me and he says to me, "Look at your mother." And she was just hysterical. And she kept saying, "I can't believe my son's a criminal." At which point in time, my father starts to wind up, and I know it's coming. And he hits me, knocks me out cold.
Your view of this is that placements were done as part of a
rehab
thought-out judicial philosophy.
Yes.
That you supported.
To a degree, I supported it.
So you have no basis to conclude that these placements were made from any improper, ulterior, or illegal motive?
I don't think so. Unless I'm very naive, I don't think he did.
The schools had a lot of influence in initiating complaints into the juvenile system.
We were faced with what occurred at Columbine. And I think there was a reaction across the country and probably the world that you need to get tough with these kids.
Why was it that everybody was so willing to say it's zero tolerance that these kids are being placed?
Because everybody loved it. The schools absolutely loved it. They got rid of every bad kid in their school. When I was in school, if you threw a spitball, maybe you went to the principal's office and sat for a couple periods. The last couple of years, if you threw a spitball, they got the police, and you ended up in juvenile court and get sent away.
Young people need to know very clearly that there's a consequence for them if they decide to violate the law. And the consequence has to be clear and has to be fairly immediate. And I think that's one of the responsibilities of the juvenile justice system.
The reality is that we have seen a substantial increase in the numbers of referrals to the juvenile justice system. Prior to Columbine, when misconduct occurred on school grounds, we all knew what the response would be. It would be a suspension. It would be after-school detention. It would be a slap on the wrist, a note in your file. But since Columbine, there has been a rush to assume that the juvenile justice system can manage all behavior. That, of course, has been an over-response. It's a misuse of the juvenile justice system.
It's becoming a common thing to have police officers and probation officers either in the school or very nearby. I don't agree with that.
You can't allow that one person to disrupt things to a point where everybody else is paying the price for their inability to control themselves.
If there's an officer there, probation officer there, it's almost like a challenge to the students. And I think it sends the message that, hey, we as school faculty and administration can't handle you.
We're going to arrest them. And we will do that in an instant if we believe it's the right thing to do.
Upon returning to school, I just got lower and lower and lower in my mood. A probation officer has his own office in the school. Sitting in the probation office was humiliating. Big, huge windows, and everyone's walking by in between classes, and there you are with your probation officer. And some teachers, I think, were really disrespectful to me, and a lot of that stemmed from the fact that, well, oh, she's one of those stupid kids that got sent to camp.
When I came home from placement to go back to school, for the first month I was okay. And then after that I fought with my teachers, I argued, I was getting suspended. I felt like the new girl again, and I really wasn't because I knew everybody. But then I have everybody asking me what did I did, how's lockup, thinking it was cool and stuff, and to me it wasn't cool.
The one time I made a comment in my class because I was known for being the jokester and the big mouth, and we were talking about the silly evacuation program that if anyone came with a gun and we had to run, we would all go out into this huge field and run away from the school. So I said, well, you know what? You stick with your evacuation plan. I'm friends with everybody, so that kid is going to remember that I let him borrow my pencil one time. And then the teacher took me to the guidance counselor's office and said that I knew someone who was going to shoot up the school.
I didn't fit in. That's why I felt like I didn't belong there. At first I was telling my father, there's something that feels like it's not right with me. I don't feel like I could be around people or something, and he didn't believe me. He just thought I was making an excuse up not to go to school, and I was telling him Dad, everything's just so in my head all the time, and it makes me nervous to just be around people. It really does. And I know I'm not crazy, but something's not right. I cry, I can't breathe sometimes. I'm it's not me, something's wrong. That's when I got diagnosed with a post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, severe anxiety, and mood swings. And then I was just missing school. And I missed 78 days of my junior year. So then I just stay away.
October, I came home for good. For all those years, I missed high school. I never went to a prom. All my birthdays, until my recent one, my 19th birthday, I was always in a placement somewhere.
I feel like it's my fault. Like it's my husband's my fault that Charlie lost 5 years of his life. They're supposed to be, your good years, your fun years, your teenage years. What does he have to talk about, his lockups?
A lot of people ask me if I hold a resentment against the judge or anything. I don't. I move on with my life. That's what I think I should do. Pursue college and, I don't know, family. So that's what I'm going to do. Future, I think, looks good for me.
News Watch 16 at 11.
Good evening, I'm Scott Schaefer. We begin tonight with another development in the ongoing corruption case in Luzerne County, as a former judge agrees to plead guilty for a second time.
Just Conrad, did you want to say anything about the guilty plea to the taxpayers in Luzerne County?
I don't have a comment right now, Andy, though. Thank you, though.
Former Luzerne County Judge Michael Conahan admits he was a major player in the alleged Kids for Cash scheme. Investigators say, and now Conahan agrees, he and former Judge Mark Civarella worked together to make sure the PA Child Care Center would be built and thrive. According to federal prosecutors, Judge Conahan, as president judge, did everything he could to hide the kickback scheme. He made sure the county-owned juvenile facility was closed down, and then he guaranteed that juveniles would be sent to the private facility in which he had a business interest.
Michael Conahan is going down. I told you he was a gangster judge, remember? How long have I been telling you? Once a gangster, always a gangster.
It all goes back to Conahan. This guy's from a district justice to a judge, and he had his hand in quite a few things.
So the ambulance company, beverage companies, the strip club. Conahan had business ranging from beer distributorship to an ambulance company. So if there was anybody who knew how to put something together, it was him.
I started coming to Florida, I would say, in 1979. We just absolutely loved coming down here. I retired in January of 2008. In the last year, I've been trying to get down here as much as possible, just to clear my head and stay away from all the publicity up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and just mind my own business and keep it low profile as possible. There's a side of me that loves Luzerne County, and I miss my family and friends. Realizing that I made a mistake and I shouldn't have done what I did, I agreed to sign the plea agreement.
I should have had no business arrangements with the juvenile detention center. I'm willing to accept the consequences for it.
Once they got the money, they then took a lot of steps to conceal how they got it or what it was for. Miracle would write up a commission and registration agreement in which he purported to pay a broker's fee to Robert Powell, who was the attorney. Then they would wire that money to another account that was held in a bank, and I believe it was Susquehanna County. And then money from there would be transferred to businesses that were controlled by Conahan. One of those businesses was Beverage Marketing, which was a beer distributorship that Conahan owed. And then again, through another series of financial transactions, the money would be paid out and sent to bank accounts controlled by Conahan and Chivarella.
It all goes back to Beverage Marketing, and he's listed that on his financial forms.
I don't think that any of the monies that were brought into Beverage Marketing, it's wrong. I mean, if it was a finder's fee and I brought it in, whether I brought it into Beverage Marketing, whether I brought it under my name, whether I gave it to you, whether I gave it to charity, I don't see as that some kind of concealment. I mean, people wire money, give checks. That's a normal course of business.
Conahan wielded immense power. He decided that he was going to remove funding from the county budget for the county-run juvenile detention center. That meant they were going to have to close it down. It was well known at that time that Chivarella was a no-nonsense, zero-tolerance judge and that he had high placement rates. But even with that, banks were still leery about funding this new juvenile detention center. So the next thing that Conahan did is that he signed a secret placement guarantee with Robert Powell, which essentially assured that the county would send juveniles to this center. Conahan really was, I think to a large extent, the ringleader here. And Chivarella kind of just followed along.
Indicates that he and I participated in a scheme to basically get a kickback gratuity. I wouldn't care so much if you didn't just outright lie to me. Now, let's put it this way, every time we think it can't get any worse, it does. It does.
I did something wrong in accepting the compensation while I was a judge. That's the issue. The government is saying to me, look, it was extrajudicial compensation. You shouldn't have taken it. It was an ethical violation. It was corrupt. We're going to call it a gratuity. You're going to admit that it's a gratuity, and therefore it's going to be a kickback.
He told me when he entered his guilty plea that he would never agree to any facts that had in it a kickback or a bribe.
Kids for cash, anything, and he just...
And the first document they send him is nothing but a scheme for a bribe or a kickback, and he signs it. There's no factual truth to the scheme. There was no scheme. Just don't understand how he could tell me one thing and then do something completely different.
If this is the least thing that I have to admit to doing, I can live with all of that. I can justify that in my mind.
I think Dad is still somewhat delusional about Mike Conahan. He was kind of the puppet master, just, you know, with the strings and my dad being on the string, just dangling. I truly believe that there was something that Mike Conahan, that the government had on him. I have to say he led a very different life than my dad led.
Do I feel betrayed? Absolutely. Do I feel lied to? Definitely. Can I believe what Mike has done to me? No, I can't. But the reality is he has done it. And now I have to live with it.
Judge, are you praying these days?
I try to deal with it one day at a time, one issue at a time. And I know in my heart that I didn't do what these people say I did. And because I know that I didn't do what people are saying I did, I can live with myself and I can live with the result. I will risk going to jail for the rest of my life than ever admit that I did something that I didn't do. Time of trial, everyone's going to know that I never sent a kid away for a penny. And everyone will know that.
Love you.
Love you.
What are we putting on him a trial for?
But don't
this
you
man
believe?
is so guilty.
Yeah, but don't you believe he's got the right to present a defense? That's the cornerstone of the American way. Isn't what you're saying completely contrary to everything we believe in America?
No, he's guilty.
High security for a defendant not in custody here in federal court in Scranton. This is former Judge Mark Chivarella and his attorneys and all their files going into the federal courthouse in downtown Scranton. Chivarella was indicted for his alleged role in the Kids for Cash scandal 2 years ago. Jury selection starting here this morning.
For the openings, I was thinking about playing off of the conflicting portraits. These guys who just got dumb luck that this guy came and wanted to give them $1 million.
Didn't know it was
And they didn't know it was wrong. Right, they didn't know it was wrong. So you almost have to laugh about it. And that's Zubrod. Chivarella always maintained there was no kids for cash, and it wasn't about kids for cash because he wasn't on trial for that. He was on trial for the monetary transactions. And the government explained that they had legal and strategic reasons for not bringing that aspect in. They had solid evidence of the monetary transactions, and that was going to be enough to get a conviction, and so that's why they opted to go that way. Was this kids for cash? Who can say other than Mark Chivarella? But the public will never, ever agree that it wasn't.
I know a lot of the public is disappointed that Mark Chivarella was not charged with kids for cash. And that would have allowed Mark Chivarella to put on evidence that he wasn't selling kids for cash, that he did this before, or that some kids' families thought he did the right thing. It would have opened up a whole can of worms. So it seems to me the U.S. attorney made wise decisions and prosecuted him just for financial crimes. Because if Mark Chivarella goes to jail for 12 or 15 years, or however many years, what does it matter if it was for financial crimes or for something else?
Every time I walked out of court, a reporter would ask me, do you have anything to say to the children? Okay, the children that you put away. And I never responded to that. I would say that I did what I thought was right for you. I'm sorry that I didn't set a better example as to how you should lead your life. But when I was making decisions that affected your life, I was doing what I thought was in your best interest.
The public corruption trial in federal court in Scranton against former Luzerne County President Judge and juvenile judge Mark Chivarella wrapping up today.
They're still in there. They just got done reading all the charges. I don't think he's going to be in custody. Former Luzerne County Judge Mark Chivarella, who's still in courtroom number 1 on the 4th floor, where he's been for the past 10 days since trial proceeded, is now convicted. Former Judge Mark Chivarella.
It's kind of, I think, the calm before the storm right now.
Mixed verdict, but at the end of the day, guilty of some very, very serious crimes.
Tony!
How do you feel, Al? Majority.
We're amazed. The jury rejected 95% of the government's case. They rejected most of the theories regarding kickbacks and bribes. The government really got hurt today on this entire case. And it stands for the proposition that what Mark Chivarella said all along was true. He never took a kickback. He never took a bribe. This is not a cash for kids case, and we hope somebody starts getting the message.
My kid's not here anymore. My kid's not here. He's dead because of him. He ruined my fucking life. I'd like him to go to hell and rot there forever. No, you know what he told everybody in court? They need to be held accountable for their actions. You need to be. Do you remember me? Do you remember me? Do you remember my son? An all-star wrestler? He's gone. He shot himself in the heart. You scumbag. You ruined my life. I hate him. Somebody better do something with him.
Mark Chivarella, guilty on 12 of 39 federal felonies. Judgment day has arrived, and Mark Chivarella is going to hell.
You still get your pension? Proud of you, Steph.
Chivarella was found guilty of racketeering charges, mail fraud, 1 count of money laundering, fraud conspiracy, and filing false tax returns. The jury found the ex-Luzerne County judge not guilty of 27 charges, including wire fraud, receiving bribes, 5 counts of money laundering, and extortion.
I was a little disappointed they didn't nail him on more charges, but I guess they got him on enough to put him away for 10, 15 years at least.
I mean, he's 60 years old. You know, if he gets 15 years, that's 75. Unless he gets out for, good time or stuff.
Now maybe you'll get to see what it feels like when you're separated from your family.
And what about his mother? Yeah. Suicide or something. Shot himself in the heart.
January of 2010, Ed was released from the state prison. And he came home, and he was home for 5 months. He lasted. was Memorial Day. Ed was up the mountain, up with his dad. They were drinking all day, the usual stuff. Of course, he's not supposed to be drinking. He's on parole. He was arguing with his dad. And I'm talking to him, I tried to get him to come here. You know, you have work tomorrow, Ed, just come and go to sleep. No, I'm just gonna, I wanna be somewhere closer to work. And he ended up going back to his little cabin right by the water. He took a gun and shot himself in the heart. These are all hearts. I just talked to Ed and I told him, you know, I was having a really hard time and I need a sign to know that he's with me. And I was walking and my foot just hit it and, you know, I just automatically bent down to pick it up. And when I picked it up, I thought to myself, you know, wow, that looks like kind of like a crooked heart. And then I turned it over and that's what it was. This one I found up at Nature Park. And it's just a round bald rock and it has a heart. It looks like it was carved in there. I found that right in the water. No matter how many signs I get, I still miss his voice. I miss hearing the words Mom. I miss his smile. I miss talking to him. I miss, you know, everything, vacations and holidays and
it wasn't like that we lived this grandiose life. Most of the money that I received, I used to send my kids to school, paid off some debt. And here I am, I'm 60 years old today, and I have nothing. Living with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. I've struggled with, you know, why did I take this money? I don't necessarily know if it was greed that caused me to do it. I think it was more a sense of financial security. You know, all the things that you want to do for your children, now I had the opportunity to do because I was going to get this money. And destroyed my life because of it.
Your hat on, Marco?
Put your hat on.
Yeah, party hat.
Pictures.
Party hat.
Just for the pictures, but
I have a grandchild who is going to be 2 in July. I have a grandchild on the way. There's a good chance that those children really won't know me in a personal sense, that they will probably only know me through stories or photographs, or I hope that they understand that I wasn't as bad as people say I was. I would hope that they understand that their grandfather screwed up big time. And couldn't be in their life because of it. Kind of tough. But to get to know this. The grandfather, the skull bucket. Today I stand before you about to be sentenced to a term of imprisonment. I would like to take this opportunity to apologize to the citizens of Luzerne County for violating the trust they placed in me. To all the juveniles who appeared before me, I would also apologize to them and ask that they forgive me for being a hypocrite. I'd hope that they would learn from my mistake and realize that everything we do in life has consequences. I've been publicly convicted of a crime I never committed. There was no connection between the money I had received and the children I placed at PA childcare. But yet today, I stand before you guilty for being the Kids for Cash judge. Those 3 words made me the personification of evil and caused a public uproar, the likes of which this community has never seen. I have lost everything that I have ever worked for or cared about. But I will never lose my will to fight against individuals who say I took cash to put children in placement when I never did. Your Honor, I would only ask that the sentence be for the crimes I was found guilty of committing and not for crime or crimes I did not commit. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to say what I had to say.
Now, what did you tell them? Well, an appeal will definitely be taken. The federal sentencing guidelines.
The journalist should live, eat, and breathe to have a story like this. But it's distressing that it happened in your county to people that you knew. That day with Sandy Fondo, I was.
Today I stand before you about to be sentenced to a term of imprisonment. I would like to take this opportunity to apologize to the citizens of Luzerne County for violating.
The journalist should live, eat, and breathe to have a story like this. But it's distressing that it happened in your county to people that you knew. That day with Sandy Fondo, I was devastated listening to her. It was just heartbreaking. I look at that picture of her on our front page. I don't anything. This is the thing I'm going to remember most from this entire 2 years.
The next day, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. It was message after message. I mean, every day it went on, for weeks. Different advocacy groups were calling. A lot of people reaching out to me, and this happened to me, and please help me. And I felt like overwhelmed. Like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, all I can do is what I just did.
No one listened because we were kids. Even though sometimes when I was sitting in camp and I was like, this is so unfair, I hate authority, I hate judges and cops and everyone, I hate our legal system, then I ended up being saved by the legal system. There are people who are still good and capable of being able to serve justice when appropriate. Something so negative can be turned around.
I'm almost 22, I'm still not in school. It's kind of embarrassing, I think. What I want to do in life is I want to go to music school. Berklee College of Music. Out of all the music schools, it's like the most prestigious. It's like you have to be the best of the best to get in there. I want to be a musician. When I was in North Central, they had this program. If you're 17, you can get a GED and you never have to go to high school again, which, as a 17-year-old, no school? Yeah. I honestly regret getting my GED now because anyone else I knew was going to college. They stuck out high school, they have good grades, and now they have so many more options than I do.
If I didn't go into homeschooling, I'd probably be a dropout. I'm still graduating from the same school. I'm still going into the school to graduate. I did my hair. I started feeling a little nervous. I feel like I'm gonna puke. I'm taking medication so I don't freak out and stuff like that. I keep getting like the cold sweats and stuff because there's gonna be so many people there and I'm like really, 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 really nervous of them. I'm glad I made it to the end. I really didn't think I was gonna graduate. My mom and my dad and my sister, they just kept giving me the confidence and everything. Amanda, you could do this, you could do this. And they wouldn't give up on me. I'm the only one that graduated out of my dad's kids.
Amanda.
I was pretty nervous on stage. And then, it left me. The best feeling in the world. I never felt like this before. Like I feel like I want to cry of joy.
Sometimes I feel like the choices that I made were wrong.
I didn't do the best that I could do, and that makes it hard when I look at your picture and I know that you're in here.
He charged me with using a credit card, which I did. It was my grandfather's and my grandmother's. Total charges that I got was 31 counts access device fraud for using the credit card, obviously, and 1 count of receiving stolen property for having it. I don't remember doing it. I was all messed up. Drinking. Wasn't just drinking either. It was smoking pot and, taking pills. Everything was hard. I needed to find a job. I was 18. And while I was in placement, they really never, they don't teach you anything like that, like what to do in the real world. I sure could have used help, I guess. It's a good thing maybe I'm here, I don't know.